Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the audiences. The numbers that Simon was talking about is amazing. Shows you what the interest is in the cloud, and I thank you for all your time. I was thinking a lot about today's session. I have about 20 minutes or so, and I do want to keep some time for some Q&A at the end. So I was thinking about what we should talk about. There have been excellent sessions. There was yesterday. Simon talked about all of the various topics, and then we have various sessions today and later in the week. So I was thinking, how can I give you, for all of those attending today, some of the lessons that I've collected over the last few years working in the cloud. So let us get started. As you can see on the screen, the title of my talk, which I changed a few times, is Driving Cloud Value Lessons from the Last Decade. So what do I mean last decade? September 2021 is an interesting month because it marks the 15 years when AWS S3, the first service in AWS, was launched almost 15 years ago. And interestingly enough, and my own humble journey with the cloud for me started in 2007, and I did not have any notion of this becoming this big. Somebody threw me into a project, started working on it, liked it, and that's been sort of the journey. And today, if you look at it, the transformational benefits of the cloud are well established. I don't think we need to talk about the importance and benefits. I think those are well established. And in fact, all you have to do is look at the revenue or the consumption of the top three cloud providers, something like $200 billion in 2021. And if you look at this number, significant number, but if you look at this number against sort of the global IT spend, which is something like $2 or $3 trillion. So you can take it from there that even though we've made a lot of progress in the cloud, many chapters of this book about cloud computing remain yet to be written. And one observation that I'll share with you is when a technology like cloud becomes popular, it becomes so pervasive that it ultimately becomes invisible, right? So already, if you are paying close attention to what is happening in the cloud with the announcement of things like the Microsoft Cloud for healthcare, for retail, we're already seeing a transition into a dedicated vertical focus cloud where you have these value add services, right? So healthcare monitoring, healthcare payments and billing, and these kinds of capabilities are part of the cloud built in. So we're already seeing that transition happen. But in any case, let me bring the talk back to what I'm here to talk to communicate over the next few minutes, which is what are some of the lessons that I have learned and I've learned through interacting with my colleagues at AIS, through our customers, and more importantly, even the community. We've collectively learned a lot, and I just wanted to share 10 simple ideas. These are not exhaustive by any means, but these are the ones that I came up with as I was preparing for today's talk. So one thing is very clear, that cloud providers are creating so many new features. Something like 2,000 to 3,000 features are being rolled out every year. And you probably heard of a term called cloud entropy, and that cloud entropy is real. You know, the changes that are happening is real. So cloud consumers and even large cloud consumers, large companies, enterprises, even they don't have the resources to keep track of what is happening, what the new features are coming out. So as a result, I feel that what we should focus on is building a strong cloud foundation. And let me give you some examples of the things that I want to talk about in terms of building the strong cloud foundation. So there's about 10 things that I want to talk about. Let's get started. First and foremost, I would say that you should look at your application portfolio and then make a decision about 3 to 5 architectural blueprints that can support 80% of your workloads, right? You have to take this craziness of new services all the time and boil it down to 3 or 5 key blueprints and then match them up against the kinds of applications you have. Look at your application portfolio and say, I'm going to double down on these blueprints. And then furthermore, once you have doubled down on those blueprints, you have to make sure that you give your users a, a simple, consistent way to provision these architectural blueprints, right? And we've heard terms like cloud vending machine or IT vending machine. So once you've taken these blueprints and you've packaged them up, you should have a way for people to walk up to this vending machine and be able to simply get a copy of that blueprint. Okay, let me give you a concrete example. So you've determined that a certain class of applications are fit for serverless, and then you've also determined that in order to be having the right security in place, you want that serverless function to be VNet joined, has to have this construct, private endpoints, whatnot. You figured that part out. That's one architectural blueprint. You don't want everybody to be going in and spinning that up on themselves. You take that blueprint, you write an automation script, language of your choice, Terraform, ARM, whatever you want, PowerShell. Make sure it is available for people to walk up and then get a copy of that. That's what I mean by consistency. And you have to treat this automation as a first-class citizen. So you have to think about resilience. So when you're deploying, even if you're deploying the serverless application with some storage account, you have to think about resilience. You're spreading that out across availability zones. You have to think about observability. Do you have the right monitoring enabled already? You have to think about security and the zero trust concept, where you assume that a breach has happened. So as you're writing these automation scripts in conjunction with those blueprints that I was talking about, these things are important to have. So that's number one, that's consistency. Number two is cost optimization, and I'm seeing a lot of this. People get excited, they jump into the cloud. First of all, some people are disappointed because they went into the cloud thinking it was a reduction in cost. It is really not reduction in cost. Cloud is about accelerating the time to value. That's how you have to go in. And once you're in the cloud, as you become mature in the cloud, your cost maturity will come. But what I'm seeing today is a lot of companies have gone into the cloud, have not put the right controls in place, don't have the tagging strategy in place, don't have all of the governance policies, don't have anomaly detection. Why is suddenly this service costing me so much? Because somebody changed some knob somewhere. And then equally importantly, of course, there are services like cost management today, but then does the cost, can it be broken up into a manner that aligns with your organizational hierarchy? So you've broken it up, maybe you're doing product-based development, you've broken it up by the products. Is the cloud cost aligned with the hierarchies that you've set up for your organization? Really important. And one word of caution, I was reading somewhere that a significant percentage, maybe even 20 to 30% of cloud consumption is waste. People did not put the right controls in place or let a resource stay on longer than it was needed. So that's becoming very important. And CFOs around the companies are getting more strict about, why am I seeing this spend go out of control? So you have to be very cognizant of that. Next one is security. Resources in the cloud are dynamic. They come and go. We are provisioning these through the API. So your security monitoring has to be dynamic. No question about that. So when I talked about the architectural blueprints, I talked about how you must make sure those blueprints are secure from the start. But that's only the first step. You have to continuously monitor those resources so that they stay compliant with your security needs. And the only way to achieve that in the cloud is thinking of security as code. What do I mean by that? You have to have jobs in place that are constantly running. So many of the failures in the cloud are configuration related errors. So you have to have jobs that are constantly scanning those configurations of the applications that you're deploying and making sure that you're not having a drift from a compliant state. So security, of course, is important. Let me talk about data gravity. And I don't know if you've heard of the term data gravity. it was introduced in 2013. And the idea is that your applications tend to get closer over a period of time, tend to get closer to the data. Makes sense, right? You want to reduce latency. So that's what the notion of data gravity is. So as we have started talking about multi-cloud, and there's an interesting paper that came out which talked about 80% of Fortune 500 companies are multi-cloud, either through acquisition or different business units deciding on a different technology. And one of the impediments that you will run in, and of course, Kubernetes and things like that allow you at least a chance. Of course, a lot more work needs to be done, but give you a chance to move your applications across different providers or even on-prem. And things like Azure Arc, uh, AWS Outpost, and things like that allow you a single control plane for your cloud. Right? But because of data gravity, because it's so hard to take your applications and move it further away from the data, it is an impediment to truly achieving a multi-cloud. And I should be careful when I talk about multi-cloud, I'm talking about an organization that is deploying a similar class of applications across more than one cloud provider. I'm not talking about I have Salesforce and I have M365 and I have Azure. That's not my definition or industry's definition of multi-cloud. Let's keep going. I'm about 10 minutes into my session and we've covered about 3 or 4. So I'll speed up a little bit. The next topic that I want to talk about is inclusiveness. And you'll probably be surprised by this, but what I mean to say here is that cloud is not just for professional developers or professional infrastructure engineers. We need to be, when we are designing the cloud, when we are designing the governance structure, when we are designing the self-service capability, when we are designing the network topology, we need to be inclusive towards a growing community of citizen developers. We know a lot of these applications today. IT is not able to keep up. The demand for applications is very high. Consequently, citizen developers and low code, no code platforms are filling in that gap. It is important as we design these cloud constructs that it should be possible for someone to take a low code, no code construct and then be able to commingle it with a far lower level platform construct. So that's really important as we think about this, because in order to achieve all of the application needs that organizations have, low code, no code, and citizen developers are going to play an important part. Let me go to the next one, data analytics. So you're thinking and about migrating your applications to the cloud. You're reimagining your applications for the cloud. Maybe you're refactoring some of those applications. Maybe you're rewriting those applications as cloud native applications. Keep in mind that these applications that you're moving to the cloud are going to be an immense source for some data analytics down the road. So if you can plan for those analytics scenarios upfront, what do I mean by that? So these applications that you're porting or rewriting or refactoring for the cloud, these applications need to expose the data. So think about data ingestion. How are you going to take the data out and go into an analytics store like a warehouse or a data lake? How are you going to do the transformation? And some of you have probably seen architectures like data mesh. And think of data mesh as microservices style architecture for data. So what it means is you are treating data essentially as a product. So there's always this chasm between I have this operational data and this analytics data. And architectures like data mesh are moving towards a model where you have a domain essentially responsible for making the data, whether it is operational analytics, available as a product to the other teams. So as you're migrating these applications, think about this aspect as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the cloud operating model. So if you have traditional infrastructure needs, networking needs, and security needs, all of these skill sets, they need to be operating in a cloud model. What do I mean by that? So you may be a network person, you may be a security person, you may be an infrastructure person, but if you are not embracing an iterative development model, if you're not embracing DevSecOps, you're not treating network as code or security as code and version control and checking and unit tests, you're not treating it as code, as first-class citizens, you simply cannot succeed in the cloud. So if you are taking a traditional IT operating mindset to the cloud, you just cannot succeed in the cloud. So it's really important to, as you work with folks from these different communities, and some of you may be network infrastructure and security teams, it's really important to start moving towards a cloud operating model. So I'm down to the last two items. We've covered 8 lessons that are important to apply as we move into the next decade or more of the cloud. The next one is quite obvious, is continuous learning. So many of you are working in the cloud already. Many of your coworkers are working in the cloud already. You may have become fluent with cloud basics. You understand IaaS, PaaS, you understand software-driven network, you understand the APIs, you understand the services. But you need to take your knowledge to the next level, and that can only happen through rigorous continuous learning and upskilling programs. So if you're a cloud professional and if you're not subscribing to things like LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, you name it, there are dozens of these learning platforms. There are YouTube videos. There are great content that is put out by the providers. The Azure team puts out great content. If you're not spending time, you're not embedding a culture of learning within your organization, it will be very hard to achieve cloud transformation goals. Cloud is changing rapidly. You have to be able to keep up with that learning. And then with that, I come to the last point in my presentation. And this point goes hand in hand with the previous one I mentioned, which was continuous learning. So along with continuous learning, and I see this with many organizations as well, you have upskilling programs, but you also, in addition to that, you need some sort of a cloud sandbox. And I'm not just talking about MSDN accounts that I have this $100 a month or $150 a month, depending on your MSDN subscription. I'm talking about a true sandbox that your organization has set up, which gives you the freedom to experiment and, frankly, freedom to fail. You need an enterprise cloud sandbox, which gives you an ability to collaborate with your coworkers, which gives you the freedom to experiment with these services. And it also gives you an ability to test out these preview capabilities that are coming out. So, for example, you have an architecture already in place, and I'll take the example that I had used previously. Private endpoints are becoming really important. I'm sure you've looked at that. If you have not, you should look into that. Private endpoints sort of give you the best of both worlds, right? You have a service like Azure SQL database or storage, but you can lock it down to your virtual network. That's essentially, there's more to private endpoints than what I've just described. But if you don't have a sandbox where you can try these things out within hours, not days and weeks, it'll be really hard to incorporate these capabilities that are coming out and learn about that and bring them into your projects and your applications. So that concludes a few of the lessons that I thought are important. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to go back to Simon and see if there are some questions that we can take or how he wants to address this. So go ahead, Simon.